Likely the most significant difference between the DCT and a standard clutch has to do with low speed maneuvering. And in those conditions, whether it's a U-turn or on a trail, it's all about dragging the rear brake. I'm going to show you here on the trail exactly what I mean. What I'm going to do is, as I come in, I'm going to put a lot of pressure to that rear brake and I'm going to add power. You'll hear the motor. You may even hear some blipping. But when I blip that motor, I have that rear brake on so the bike's not going to lunge forward. Also on the DCT, anytime you do a tight U-turn or tight maneuver, I highly recommend standing up. Doing this, dragging the rear brake sitting, is certainly not as easy or as precise as when you're standing on the bike. So once I get to the end of the turn, I can give a little bit extra power, release the brake, and it'll cause the bike to kind of pop out of position. It'll tighten it up just slightly. And I'm not going to get lost trying to throw the clutch at the same time. So again, from a standing position, I'm on the brake. You see I can add power. You can see the way the bike responds. That's the idea, is I want that power going into that back end without the bike moving. So I pick up the rear brake. A lot of power, rear. And then I can turn the bike all the way around. Let's try that one more time. So as I come in, I've got the power on the bike, rear brake, holding it, rear brake, power. And then the bike goes all the way around. So all that blipping, is going against the rear brake. That keeps the bike forward motion. So brake on, power. There we go. Of course, you can always do it with a little slide turn and a little power as well. It doesn't always turn out as planned. But the idea is that even when I'm blipping, even when I'm adding power to that transmission, I'm always holding that rear brake against it. That is your power control. The DCT is likely the most misunderstood technology in motorcycling today. What I found, I've spent a lot of time with this bike now, and I'm telling you right off the bat, I really like it. It's great technology, and there's a lot of places where I think riders have a huge advantage by having it. There's only really one place where I find a clutch being beneficial. The DCT is not for beginner riders who don't know how to operate the clutch. And it's not the best bike for riders who have zero off-road riding experience. And the reason is, if you happen to be in the wrong riding position, if you're standing on the bike and you get thrown back and you whiskey throttle that bike, the ride's gonna be really exciting and festive, and the ending will probably be great for video, but probably not very good for your health insurance. That means that you have to be much better about staying forward over the bike, staying on top of the handlebars. And that means, let me show you, on this bike, which is beautiful fit by the way, I love the way it fits me, one of the best out there, is that I need to be up and over the top of these handlebars. If I get back here, if I'm a rider that likes to stand up here or I have risers on it, I'm much more likely to be thrown back. This isn't a bike, especially in the DCT configuration, that I would run risers on. I want to be forward, I want to be over those handlebars so nothing goes wrong. As long as I have light control of that throttle, it's more of an advantage than anything else. When we have a bike with a clutch, and this is one of the arguments I hear against the DCT, is when they're in really technical environments, they want to have that clutch to control the power. The DCT has that same power feed. except instead of being throttle and clutch, that's built into the throttle. There is a light delay, not in a bad way, but the way it feeds power out is I add that throttle. It's a very smooth linear power delivery to the back wheel. If I hammer it, it doesn't take long for it to get back there. This is also likely the only disadvantage of a DCT. If I'm going over obstacles or I want to do wheelies, it does make it harder because of that delay, because it's so smooth, because it's forgiving in that regard. But that can be overcome as well. If you use the rear brake and you hold the rear brake, you can put power against it. And I mean a lot of pressure against the rear brake. That engages the transmission, it puts full power so it's ready to go. There's no spongy delivery. As soon as I release that rear brake, the bike's gonna go. That's the difference between this bike and a regular clutch, and it's the most significant difference. Instead of feeding power with the clutch, you feed power with the rear brake. That means technical riding, slow speed riding, you hold that rear brake and you add power against it, and when you need a little of movement, you just ease off that rear brake. I never have my foot not covering the rear brake on a DCT bike. On a clutch bike, sometimes I cover, sometimes I don't. On this bike, it's always over the top because it's my clutch, it's my power monitoring, and that's the most significant difference. If I wanted to make this bike perfect, if I wanted to say, let's remove all of the arguments about that power delivery, what I would do is add a handbrake on the left side. And I'm not talking about the parking brake up here. I know there's a parking brake, but that's a mechanical brake. It's not the hydraulic brake. I want a hydraulic brake up here so that I'm not always using my foot. If I'm in very technical environments where the bike's leaning underneath me, I can use that front brake here that goes to the rear. So I'm saying front handbrake, hydraulic, that goes to the rear, and then monitor that power there. But the places that I really need that are very, very small. Almost always the rear brake works just fine. A lot of fun, great technology. So the next question you're gonna probably wonder is, does the DCT do anything better than a standard clutched motorcycle? And I'm gonna say yes. If you like drifting the back end, if you love doing pivot turns and sliding around corners, nothing does a better job than this. Because it feeds the power so linear, all I have to do is concentrate on my body position and the throttle. The bike doesn't stall. I can come into any corner, lock up the back end, slide it in and add power. And I'm not worried about that coordination. Makes it much, much easier. It is awesome. And I do mean that, not in a kid, teenager, high school kind of a way. I mean, this bike is truly awesome when you want to do slip and slide. With that said, I'm gonna go play on the trail some more because this is the perfect riding weather. Every bike has its pluses and minuses, and by far this is the #1 drawback to the DCT. Take a look here, you can see exactly how soft and how deep the rocks are. The problem with the DCT is the same as when you're running an auto clutch. It's centrifugally driven. So even though I'm very, very, very careful about how much power I feed out and very gentle about feeding that power out, that wheel starts to turn and rotate, and then once the rocks kick out and slip, then I get power engagement and it starts to spin. And I can use the brake to help buffer some of that, but not quite as well as I can with the clutch. The traction control on this bike is not very helpful off-road to me. It interferes too much. This is a first generation, and I've tried all 3 different modes. I've played with the gravel mode. I just run with traction control off. That way I have better control. Also, in really technical stuff, I'm running with the automatic transmission off. So I'm running paddle shift and automatic, so I'm always in the gear that I want. But this is by far its greatest weakness. Let's see how I can do.
Why did you knock it over?
Well, it's buried in the rocks anyway, so I might as well throw the bike over. Then what I can do is I can point it the direction I want it to go using my body weight, and then I can fill up my hole and hopefully get some more solid surface underneath it and see if we can get some forward momentum before we bury it in the ground again. If this doesn't work, I'll go grab some ferns, some leaves, anything I can to kind of build up the ground on this. Also, I'll get off the bike so I can give it a little forward push at the same time. That is soft ground. It's still sinking into the ground. Let's go. Manual, first gear, traction control off. I'm going to give it just a little bit of forward push. And before I fill the bike, all I'm doing is filling the transmission load. Then I'm going to give it a little push forward, push on the back of the handlebars, and very, very gentle throttle. Perfect. Thanks for watching the DCT series, but I have one more tip for you. I was asked specifically, when should we use manual on the DCT? Turns out I figured that one out fairly early in the shoot. I was out doing the slide turn with the pivot and discovered the bike wanted to upshift when I wasn't ready for it to upshift. I was coming up a hill over a small bank. As the back end came up light, the idea was to lock the back brakes, slide the bike into the corner. But the bike was shifting just before I hit the top, so when I hit the power always came on soft. I switched around to manual, that helped a ton, and I continued using that manual and comparing it to the automatic settings all the way through. And what I found is the places you really want to be in manual is any kind of a technical ride. In that case, I needed throttle and I needed power to the ground when I needed it. I didn't want to have it soft on delivery, and it was shifting just at the wrong time. So that manual made a difference. Going up and down the hills, it also helped. I was always in the right gear. The bike can't see that you're on a slope. And if you're going up a hill, as those RPMs start to build up, it shifts for you, but you really aren't necessarily ready for the shift. Going manual keeps you in the gear you want. Downhills are the same thing. If you're going downhill, the bike doesn't know that you're going downhill. It doesn't know that you want to hold that compression braking just a little bit longer. So having that manual going downhill will also be a big benefit to you. The other places manual came in very useful had to do with going over obstacles or where I was picking up RPMs just slightly for a period of time and then the bike was immediately going to slow back down. And I didn't want to go through the process of letting the bike shift up and then try to figure out that I'm going slow. And holding that manual allowed me to either upshift and downshift when I wanted it to, or just to avoid the shift altogether. Worthwhile, you need to get proficient to do it if you want to get the most out of your DCT motorcycle. The other, as far as obstacles, jumping, wheelies, things like that, definitely knowing your gear, being in that gear is going to be a benefit. To practice this shifting, what I'm going to recommend you do, and I've started playing around with, is I pulled out my mountain bike. If you don't own a DCT, if you're watching this video because you're curious about it, what you'll find is that the DCT shifts in the same positions as your mountain bike, which means on the left side, my pointer finger is going to shift and my thumb is going to shift. On a DCT, the back thumb downshifts, the finger upshifts. On your mountain bike, it's just the opposite. The forward finger upshifts for higher speeds, the back finger downshifts. Even though it's opposite of the direction of the shift, just going through that motion, that muscle memory of using those fingers for shifting will help you increase your proficiency. And again, this is no different than trying to remember that the front brake on your mountain bike's on the left and the front brake on your motorcycle or your Africa Twin is going to be on the right. That's a great way to get more proficient at it. If you've been watching the whole series, you'll see the quality was a little low on the video. Sorry about that, guys. Everything was shot on a GoPro. It was dark, it was wet, it was cold. Christina came out to help me on this series, and she was trying to hold those and move with me. And the GoPros were really struggling just because of the lighting, and we had everything turned down too low for the ISOs. Rather than throw the video away, that's where I ride, that's what we do. I figured you wouldn't mind. Also, the sound quality I know was a little crackly. That's again because the water got into the mic and into the connections. Cut out as much as I could, and the rest I just let it kind of fly with that. The drone was kind of isolated. We didn't have a lot of movement on the drone. Hope you enjoyed what I did put in there. Still waiting on the Skydio 2 to be released. Put a down payment on, it's on the way. I'm gonna pick up a gimbal and a 1.8 aperture lens for the Sony. So next time we get some low light, we'll have better quality. If you're interested in contributing towards that new gear, please join me on Patreon and throw a few dollars towards the program. Or you can always make a one-time donation to say, hey, we just want to help you get to the drone, Brett. Hope you guys enjoyed the shoot. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. And more importantly, tell everybody that if you really like the videos, tell everybody that you see, whether they want to hear it or not, how awesome the videos were, and they all should subscribe. If you don't like what I'm doing, just keep your mouth shut and don't tell anybody.